G'day and welcome to another episode of SPCs Unleashed. And after a few weeks where really we've been living in the land of soft skills, which if you know us, you know we're kind of passionate about anyway, we are heading into I don't think you can ever escape soft skills, but some territory that probably has a little bit more intellectual knowledge involved in it. And this week we're going to take a look at the value stream and art identification workshop and how to make it sing for you. And our choir master tonight is Stephan.
So let me pick up the talking stick. Hello and welcome to this episode. I think we hit a honeypot, but there are some bees around this honeypot. So if you look at what Scale Agile says through the Copilot, this workshop aims for different things. It aims to address organizational complexity. It wants to improve the alignment between business and product development. And how do you organize your teams and team of teams around the flow of value? So that sounds quite a lot to do. And if I look at my mates and they're nodding heads, I'm sure they have some passion in that topic. Who would like to start with his passion about the value stream and art identification workshop?
I think I'm going to go. Yes, I think I'm going to go. This is also a question to all of you, by the way. Do you think that the value stream identification workshop is potentially one of the most destructive workshops that can happen?
Do you think maybe it feels like Russian roulette a little bit, Ali?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the thing is, I think that's jokes aside. This is what makes or breaks your transformation. If you start on the wrong foot, there's so much that can go wrong, that you can destroy. You set up teams without a clear scope. You set up the wrong teams together that together still cannot deliver any value. There's so much that can go wrong over there. So it's I think it's one of those huge challenges. If you do this right, it sets you up for much more success later on. And because of that challenge, it is tense, and I think a really nice topic to sort of over-engineer. So that's why I really like it. You need to spend way too much time in it, in preparation and making sure that the right people are there, just to make sure that the rest of the agile transformation then becomes a bit easier. You set up teams for success.
Yeah, if value stream and artification workshop would be Russian roulette, how many bullets do you have in the play? No. Well, it's really important what you said, Ali, is you're dealing with a lot of important people. It's really like a minefield sometimes. And my surprise or passion was during COVID. I really had to rethink how I'm doing this workshop. Because before I said, yeah, it's a workshop, let's do it. The first two, 3 times you have to do it anyway by the book. It's also part becoming an SPCT. You have to do it by the book. So yeah, was a cool experience. And I will also tell during this show what I changed and what I tried out. And during COVID, I have to try new approaches because I wasn't able or I wasn't capable in believe how this will work remote with a mirror board and people being angry and you have to care dialogues, etc. And then I tried new approaches and new experiments, and we will have a chance to talk more about this and also listen to your experiments and ideas.
So I'm going to stick to the Russian roulette theme, and probably really back to Ali's comment. I believe you are guaranteed to get the wrong answer. Right?
Right.
If a year later you're not looking back saying we got the wrong answer, then you're probably not learning. And so going into this, right, and on the surface, it's a huge workshop with lots of senior people making huge decisions. But by the way, you're going to get it wrong. So how do you make sure that you set the stage to acknowledge, hey, we're going to get it wrong. And what's really important is we're going to start learning. And as we learn, we're going to start to tune and fix some of the mistakes we're about to make together in it.
That's a really, really important part, because in some cultures, you want to do it perfectly from the beginning. And having this mindset, it will be the first time wrong, not because we are stupid, because we will learn during the path. That's really an important advice. Because last week I had to talk with somebody. He told me, yeah, if I change now my opinion, I have decided wrong the first time.
Yeah.
I said, no, you have new information now. It wasn't wrong the last time. It was right at that moment. And now you have a better opinion, more data. You've seen things not working. Now you can make the right decision for today. So it's a really, really important thing, Mark. Thank you for that.
Thanks for those opening statements. And as you can see, we're still talking about the honey or finding the honey. But before you get the honey, you come to the beehive and you have to kind of master several challenges. So in this show, we will probably talk about some complex mechanics, right? You have existing processes, sometimes difficult to navigate, sometimes a process is not even known. They will surface during the VS AI. It's a people thing. We will talk about people and how people feel, how people act, how people interact. And for sure, in Switzerland, as many people you have, as many opinions at the table, right? What about alignment among leadership? We talk about leadership. Are they aligned? Do they know what they want? Or still do we have different silos working against each other? You guys already mentioned participation issues, right? Mark said there's senior leadership in there. And if I compare that to a picture in the circus, you're in the cage with a few lions and tigers. So how do you deal with that one? Organizational resistance. Mark mentioned it, right? If you look into the future, and if you are in the future looking back to what you did a year ago or 2 years ago, did something really change, or did we just repaint the house a little bit? It looks nice and shiny, but it's still the same house instead of moving house. And in the end, and Mark, I'm with you. Your statement during preparation, probably we need a second episode, because it's also about a culture, how people behave. Are they really ready to change? Or is it maybe also the wrong moment to start something new? Maybe you have to clean up your house first. Maybe you have to do something else before you dive into something that is that much complex. So with that, thank you very much for your opening statements. Let's start with the first question, and I'm really poking a hole into the beehive. We all know those 6 steps or suggested steps of the value stream and data identification. And question to you guys, what are your changes or tweaks that you applied and why? So who's brave enough to open the beehive?
It's everything and nothing. One thing in advance, if you've never done it, just do it the 6 steps as is proposed. So learn about it and then start to change it, because it's like with everything you're doing. If you've never done a PI planning and think you have to change everything, you will end up with a mess. So if you're a young SPC, do it the way it is. What I did, even if Mark said it's not a soft thing now here, I did a lot of soft changes. This by accident, because my groups were too big, and I thought I have to do it something that is more energizing. And what I'm looking now, because of this experience, I'm looking for conflicts in the first minutes, the first moments. So how do I do this? I let people doing the same work in subgroups in breakouts, and let them debrief in a long time. And I also poke a little bit. And if I hear something different, I just provoke them that they give the right answers, or that they start discussing, that they have an alignment. And one of the changes is, in my case, it's always 2 days, or it's always a night in between. And my goal is that at the first day, at the end, they're really hating me, and they really hate the workshops, because it's impossible what we are doing here. Who the heck hired this consultant? And they just go home with a lot of anger in their guts, stomach, or whatever. And then the next day they come back, and they have completely new ideas, and they find solutions while they were showering, running, biking, or whatever. For me, it's also very, very hard, because if this experiment goes wrong, they will hate me also the second day, and I have to bring a solution. But it always worked out. So my change is looking for conflicts in the beginning, because they are important for alignment at the end.
So
if you go with,
Nico, already a question from my side. How do you make sure they turn up the second day?
Oh, that's a great question.
Because they might hate you that much, they will leave the show.
The one thing is, you have people there in the workshop, they really want to achieve something. It's not an alibi exercise, you just have to do it. They're really struggling, they really want to be aligned around value. And usually those people who are most angry are angry because they really want to do something. If you're just there because you're paid by your time, then you will come anyway. And if you're there because you want to change something, you want to show how smart you are now, or you want to show that you have achieved something, and you want to show how you can progress. So they are coming because they're intrinsically motivated, or the worst case, because they're paid for it. But usually they're coming because they are intrinsically motivated to change something. And usually during the night, I also prepared some backup plans, what I would do in their position. But I never, ever needed these plans, because they came with better ideas how they can realign teams, realign systems, split teams, split systems. And it's really, really cool. And one advice is also, don't skip a step if you do it the first time. I remember once somebody said to me, yeah, we've done this exercise already. It's easy. Let's skip to the next part. And so, okay, if you've done it already, just draw it. So let me look, we have it somewhere. No, you have done it. Just draw it there. It's a whiteboard, draw it. Yeah,
Okay.
you can imagine what happened. It was completely 3 different ideas, and then the discussion started again. So don't be, just do it. Just do it.
So you follow the 6 steps, but you tweak on a human, on a personal level. That's what I
Yes.
understood. Perfect.
That's one part, and the other part is what's doing something completely different. But I think in the next show.
I think Ali might drop a bomb now.
Yeah. I've I do fully agree with Nico that whenever you're doing this for the first time, use the baseline. Just use the whatever is out there. It works pretty well. The 6 steps that you'd follow. What I've noticed is that the inclusion of the initial step, which is identifying the operational value stream, which is actually the second step, because you first start with the trigger and sort of identifying the customer base. But just including the operational value stream is very valuable. But for some reason, and I've been working a lot with people that are working for companies developing hardware. That operational value stream is a tricky one. It's a very tricky one. Whenever we talk about anything that contributes to the development of the product, which is, feasibility studies, the design of the different modules, the integration of the various modules, testing it onto a proto, sending it out for an initial manufacturing, moving on to mass manufacturing, or what is called industrialization. Everything until you have an actual product that is testable by a customer. not necessarily a sellable product, but at least something that's verifiable, that boundary everyone understands. But whenever we look at a little bit more than that, including marketing and sales and support afterwards, or the supply chain management, or safety and homologation, which is all kind of hardware topics, it becomes very tough. So I tend to scale down the focus to anything that is related to creating the product, all the way until something that is testable testable by a customer. So I'm rescoping the workshop a bit.
That sounds interesting. So you start with kind of a different step by leaving the operational value streams outside, right? But then kind of framing the workshop for 1 or 2 days. Am I right with that summary?
Yeah. So it remains the same. I think what Nico also mentioned is you would like to do that in 2 steps, or at least in 2 days. I fully agree. I think the longest that I had, let's say the longest workshop that I've experienced spanned 2 different weeks. So we had a couple of sessions in the first week, we had a couple of sessions in the second week, and I found that actually very helpful, because somewhere in the first week we've identified a lot of bottlenecks and struggles and conflicting opinions, especially whenever you would like to, in a way, reorganize or fuse different product lines or business lines, because that's how it is experienced. And having some time in between also for the people that are involved to just talk with each other and just to understand each other a little bit more. And that's, as an SPCT, you could facilitate that. That really, really worked. But it took a lot of time, and trying to block that much time of these, the people that are typically involved in these kind of workshops is already a challenge in itself.
I must say, Ali, you're not only a good hardware guy, you will be a superb farmer. What I just heard is you prepare the field and you have a good buy-in by setting the field or the stage for the people, right? So, Mark,
I guess so.
how about you? What about the 6 steps?
So I have to tell you, ever since you started down this honey and bee path, I've been waiting for one of us to try and find the honeypot. But on a slightly more serious note, but full confession, I had never actually looked at the value stream identification workshop until I had to prepare for this episode. So maybe somebody takes away my fellow badge right now, but by the time that workshop was published, I had run so many value stream identification and art design workshops that I went, there's no way that toolkit is going to suggest to me doing something different than what I already do. And I think people had shown me pieces of it, but I went, okay, if I'm going to do this episode full justice, I have to go and see the current state of it. And I think the first comment I'd make is that the toolkit and the guidance that comes with the toolkit is fantastic if you're new to this game. Right? And if our trigger question from Stephan is, how do you change it? My advice to you is, if you're doing it the first time, think very carefully before you change it. Because any change you make potentially is going to break something. And if you haven't built the knowledge and the experience to understand the impact of the things you're thinking about changing, there's a risk. Now, having said that, does it look like a pretty serious flow? Well, it's what we teach in the SPC course, right? Day 3, we teach that flow. And I must confess, I feel for the typical SPC, because you think about what happens when you're teaching the SPC class. You teach this, you take people through roughly the 6 steps in a very abbreviated time. And at the end of it, generally, they're all incredibly confused. And you go, okay, if you're feeling nervous now, picture doing this in your organization with a lot of senior people in the room. Here are the books you should read and the videos you should watch so you have a clue about what it is and you've got a chance. I don't know, maybe you guys are better teachers than me, but that's where I find a lot of people get to. If I looked at it and said, what's most important to me, I'm going to be the exact opposite of Ali. Right? Starting with the OVS, or starting with how does the business make money and support its customers? Because sometimes OVS can be a very confusing term to some audiences. But if you look at it and go, how does my business make money and support customers? And how do I anchor everything I'm about to change in maximizing the way we serve our customers and make money as a business? That provides the paradigm from which everything else should flow. No matter what you do, if you don't start anchored in that, how do we produce outcomes for our customers and business, everything else is going to go horribly wrong.
And so your focus is much more on it's much more organization design, while the focus that I have is much more on how do we develop a product, which is much more focused on just product development. Well, for you, it is like a broader optimization, I guess.
So I think if you look at it through the lens of, and I was listening to you going, all right, if I'm a hardware product, right, and a big hardware product, particularly a big new version of it, right, it's a long, complex world in which, there's not necessarily an MVP of a car until the car's reached a certain point where it's safe to drive on a road, right?
Correct.
And, maybe once that car's on the road and, I'm living in the world of EVs and it's receiving constant updates, right? In hardware, you're oriented towards these large, complex products where an awful lot of stuff has to come together before the product can hit the market. But if you're living in the world of software and services, you're looking at a world where actually, what's the product? The product is I can get a home loan from the bank, right? Or I can pay my mobile phone bill, and so this is something which is really oriented towards receiving the occasional big change, but a very continuous flow of smaller changes. And so if I'm thinking, right, why do we do this stuff, right? Well, the reason we're trying to do it is to make a better business, make a more successful business. And so it's like, what's the design for me that gets business value into the market sooner and generates more learning and feedback from customers faster to steer my strategy?
What I think is you're both doing the same when you start, but then you visualize it differently, because you both ask the questions, how do I provide value for my company? How do I provide value for my customers? And that's also the starting point of the workshop. And while hearing you, I just start thinking, I have to rewatch the episode, because I think I'm the whole time thinking, but for me, it sounds the same. It's about how do I provide more value for both customer and me, and that's a starting point. And then you have different visualizations to go to the results. So you're doing the same, guys.
Interesting to watch and listen to you guys. So if we wrap up the first question a little bit, what I hear is the 6 steps is like a skeleton, but we have to put meat on the bones, right? No matter where you start, if you do copy paste, you're probably not doing a good job as a change agent, as an SPC. And by the way, that's what I heard from you, Nico. Don't do it alone. Do it in pairs. Do it with experienced people the first few times, and get to know what a value stream art and identification workshop is. So, may I add my 2 cents is what we do quite often is we ask for the purpose. So preparing the field is like, do you want to optimize something that's already existing, but you have your pain points, you have your challenges, and therefore not starting with an OVS or some silos or some business units, really asking for what is the benefit of optimizing something on behalf of your customers. So finally, it's about the products, it's about the product increments, it's about creating value. The other one that we introduced very early is, do you have innovational challenges that might compete with your existing organization? And that leads to the lean portfolio management. How do you exploit, how do you explore business models, right? And that could be a leading or a guidance as well when it comes to this going through the steps, no matter if you have 5 or 4 or 6, or if you have an adapted form. We found it very helpful to do so.
And while you were summarizing, we had a great comment on LinkedIn. Shohari for the value statement identification was exactly a great summary too.
Thank you, Pradeep.
Exactly. Sounds good. Okay, cool. Let's leave kind of the curriculum, the 6 steps, and I would like to add another question. How do you align leadership ahead of such a workshop on intended outcomes? And we're not talking about an agenda. We're not talking about that. You probably have value streams and arts, maybe even teams. Because I say quite often, you are not here to implement SAFe. What is the purpose? We want to create better value for our customers. And how do we now align leadership ahead on the intended outcomes? What are your tips and tricks, your experience when it comes to this question or this challenge?
So, Nico,
Who's
I've got to
first?
say, I'm dying to find out what Wunderfrage means.
Okay.
Yes, in our prep notes, I just wrote Wunderfrage. That's a coaching technique which it's a systemic coaching technique which you ask the participants, imagine a miracle happened. How is life now different? Sounds like the postcard from the future we know as SPCs is a similar thing, but the important thing is you always talk about the future like it's past. It's a brain trick. So you are now there, 5 years have passed, everything is perfect. How does it look like? And I'm really starting doing more and more interviews, empathy interviews than before. So my first value identification workshop was doing a leading safe, and the next day just going in without preparation, nothing. Was also cool because all the participants were 2 days with me and I had a chance to learn and talk with them. But during COVID happened exactly that I hadn't a connection to those people because everything was remotely, even the leading safe parts. And you don't see them in the breakouts. You have no chance to approach them on the coffee machine. By the way, I don't drink coffee, but I'm always at the coffee machine. I don't smoke. I'm always with a smoker outside. So you hadn't these chances to connect to those people. And then during Corona and COVID, I really started doing more of these interviews. And then I was surprised, oh, there's also a chapter empathy interviews in the preparation guide. I've never seen this before. Maybe it changed the last years. But I was exactly doing these interviews and asked what happens after the result. Because also during COVID, a client of mine started the 3rd time to doing it. And the previous 2 times it failed. And so my question to myself was, why should it this time go well? So, and then this Wunderfrage helped me, asking everybody at the end the Wunderfrage. And once I asked this to the CEO, and it was a really cool answer to realizing how much embedded this company is in other companies. Because we all thought, yeah, if just the C-level just do their job, it's perfect. We just can decide. And then we realized they cannot decide so much than we thought. Because of this Wunderfrage, the answer was, so my question was a little bit more harsh. I asked him, imagine you have all the power you have. What would you change in this organization? And the question in my back head was, if you are the CEO, what would you do? And he was a CEO. And then I realized how much rules and how small his box is he can act, because he's part of a bigger organization.
Yeah.
And then I realized, okay, now we have a different problem than I thought. Okay, I need more people than I planned to have. And that's how I care for alignment. I have a lot of talks and conversation with 2 people, 3 people, maybe doing a dry run of the exercise, seeing where they're struggling, and then with the next and the next. And Wonderfrage is, a miracle happened. What has changed?
There you go.
That sounds interesting. Mark, are you satisfied? Wunderfrage, clarified.
Well, I love the word and I love the translation. And I think now that I understand the word, well, to an extent, I think my answer and Nico's are very similar, right? If you think about a value stream and art identification workshop, that's generally, if it's going to be meaningful, it's a lot of senior executives and a lot of senior leaders all in the room. And, if you're thinking about that collection of people and you're asking them for a 1-day workshop, a 2-day workshop, right? You are spending an awful lot of political credit. It's a really significant thing. And you want to make sure there's a good return. So there is somebody, and I'm just going to call them your sponsor. That's somebody who has the mandate on the authority and the influence to get that group of people to spend the time in the room for this workshop. And they have a lot riding on it. As everybody has to walk out going, that was a good investment of time, and we feel like we came to valuable decisions. So for me, that leadership alignment is, time with that sponsor, right? Test possibilities with them, understand their limits. And back to this where, your comment about the CEO recognizing their limits, test the what if, and generally they will know where the landmines are, right? Because usually by the time you're getting anywhere near prepping for this, you've got a vague clue what you think the answer should look like, right? Because you've looked at the landscape and you've gone, oh, that's horrible. We've got to fix that. And I think this is going to have to look like this. And some of those things are going to trigger potentially very large responses. You might look and go, this value stream, it really has to blend these 2 areas. But you need to know that the 2 executives who own those 2 areas have hated each other for the last 10 years and have taken every opportunity to undermine each other for the last 10 years, because that's the company's history. And if you walk into the room blind to that possibility, you're potentially going to blow things up, right? Despite Nico's love of creating conflict early. You've got to get through conflict to get creativity, but it's got to be conflict you survive. So working with the sponsor to find the landmines, and then working out the things you need to test. And again, back to Nico's comment, doing the empathy interviews to find those things, to incorporate them into the way that you're structuring the workshop, but also framing it, right? Because for me, I'm not ever framing that workshop as we're going to use these 2 days to find an answer. We're going to use these 2 days to paint a possible future, to select a first step into that future, and agree on the way that we're going to learn as we go and update what that possible future looks like. And so really doing that positioning, because, if there's one thing that gets people stuck, particularly leadership, it's like, well, we're going to make decisions we can't take back. And they get closed and they get defensive, and an awful lot of those leaders are going to get challenged to their turf. And you've got to navigate that. So that's me.
Oh, that means, Mark, we should change the name from Value Stream and Art Identification to the Future Workshop. Did I get that right?
Painting possible futures is the language I will often use.
Let me add another question so far. When I was listening to Nico and you, Mark, it sounds like prep time. And prep time is not only probably days or weeks. What's your experience, guys, so far?
So the last time I did it was really a period of 4 months because the interviews and dry runs and mini dry runs and the next interviews. But they were not really in a rush because it was a big company. They have other heartbeat than I have. So for me it was endless long. For them was just right. It was around 4 months, and it's around there, a quarter and a bit little and longer. I would
Okay.
like to have it faster, but
I,
it needs
think,
time.
I think for me it depends on the lumpiness of the transition, right? Because if you look and you go, their first step is probably going to be 6 arts that are coupled together into a solution train, right? Then, there's a lot of very big decisions and a lot of people going to be impacted by the outcome of the workshop. So if that workshop is going to trigger some really large, lumpy changes, more prep time to make sure you can come out of it with something in pretty solid shape. Really important. But if the outcome is likely to be, we've painted a possible picture, we're going to launch 2 arts, we're going to learn from them, then we're going to launch the next arts, we're going to learn from them, then we're going to launch. So you're starting to get into small batch transformation instead of large batch transformation, then I think you can go with much shorter prep time.
Can I have the answer in easy English? Because if I translate lumpy, I get back Snow White. What do you mean with lumpiness?
So here it is, right? If you think about the action from that workshop is formalize value streams and arts, right? Are you going to create big batches of arts or small batches of arts? Right? If you're going to create big batches of arts on the back of the workshop, much more preparation.
Now I got it. Thank you, Mark.
Well,
Thank you for the translation.
I think this was Stephan who mentioned that. Just making sure that the audience really understands the intent is already a very good step, and that might require quite a lot of pre-alignment. The thing is, in my experience, there is always it's just always a moment of panic. It's just the unfortunate thing that the value stream identification workshops that I've been part of were always sort of in a state when, for the longest time, teams and trains have been operational in one form or another, but the company completely skipped value stream and art identification. So therefore, a lot has been, a lot of damage has been done already. So there's on my just those are just I guess my examples in my sample size is that there is always a huge urgency. We need to fix this. It already has been painful for so long. This stuff doesn't work, so we need to fix it right now. And the thing is, if we can somehow get at least a collective understanding that we would like to achieve, I don't know, efficiency, less handoffs. We would like to have a better integration with our suppliers, or that kind of stuff. That's sort of a collective intent that everybody sort of wants to fix. Has been really helpful to get our leaders along, and at least to a certain extent in the same joining the session with the same goal.
Interesting. I can second that. What we heard so far is understanding senior management, having a good knowledge about what is the context, right? Calls for a lot of networking. If you don't have the network, you have to create it, or you have to find the people who give you the access or pave the way to the people who have really a say in that. So alignment, very important. We should be clear about an intended outcome of the workshop before we dive into the workshop. Let's have a break. Let's go to the jiggles. And Nico is really, really challenging us. The question today, imagine that the value stream and data identification is a hunting club. Tell me more about the sport and the events. And I'm immediately handing over the talking stick to Nico.
I thought it's such a great question, and then you can imagine how much time I needed yesterday to prepare for it. So for me, it's this hunting club. It's not about fun; it's about surviving. So you gather together to find something you can eat afterwards, because otherwise, you're walking backwards. So you need something to find. So that's why the first event is you come together, try to find out which skills do we have to start hunting, and also think about where do we gonna hunt, what do we gonna hunt. So discuss it together, and then go split in groups so you have more chances. And be careful not to hit each others with the guns you're having while you're hunting. And at the end, you have the big feast. You guaranteed your future. You have enough to eat for the next parts of it. But food will be eaten at some point. You need to hunt again, and then you do it again and overall again. And that's the picture I had to find out yesterday.
Ali, how about hunting? Do you like it? Don't you like it?
I'm not a hunter. Earlier in this episode, I've understood that I'm much more of a farmer. I would not hunt.
Great.
I'd run away from it. I would ignore it. I'm not a hunter at all. The thing is, without hunting, there's probably no barbecue. And I like barbecue.
So imagine it's a farmers club. Tell me more about
No, so that would be my 2 cents.
Okay. Mark,
Now,
let's go Aussie land.
I've got to be a little bit with Ali because, like, of all of the jiggles that Nico has fed us, I probably hated this one more than any other. Because
Yes.
I'm not a hunter. I've never been a hunter. I never will be a hunter. But I do like fishing. So after I had spent a long time trying to figure out how on earth I could pick a hunting story I had any empathy for, I remembered a few years ago, I went for the first time on an offshore fishing trip. So it was a 3-day charter. We were 75 miles off the coast, chasing kingfish. It was an amazing experience. But what was amazing about it was the way everything worked together as a connected ecosystem. We jumped on the boat, we started heading out, and then the first thing we did was we stopped for a few hours to catch little bait fish. And, the skipper had these 2 tubs, and, when those 2 tubs were full of these tiny, like I'm talking this big bait fish, then we had enough for our charter and we could move on. And I'm looking at these tiny bait fish going, these aren't ever going to lure a kingfish. And he's like, no. These are to catch the squid, which are the bait that the kingfish really like. So we caught the bait fish to catch the real bait fish. And then, of course, there was also, well, you don't just need bait because you need chum sitting in the water to attract them. And what makes really good chum is tuna. Now, I've been out previously. I've paid for fishing charters just to go and catch tuna. And this guy's like, oh, no, we need tuna so that we can chop it up and just throw it into the ocean. And so this is the third thing we're catching, all as part of our preparation to eventually try and hook up on these kingfish. And then, by the way, while we're there, we also need fish to eat because kingfish, of course, are catch and release. So every day there's, we're going to go here and we're going to get the food that we eat tonight. And it was the most amazing experience of understanding, like it's just working your way through all the connections and the complexity of the ecosystem while sitting in the hands of a skipper who's been doing this for a very long time and understands everything. And that for me is the VSAI, right? It's an ecosystem. Everything's connected. And whether it's the connections between people, between systems, between organizations, between products, right? It's actually understanding how things are connected that's going to get you to the outcome you're looking for.
I really had some struggles as well. And I really had to ask a hunter who is a relative of mine, what do you do, guys, in a hunting club? How do you meet? What do you do when you go on a hunt? What's going on? And what he said is, you need to know your hunting grounds, because you get an invitation from another club or from some hunters, but you don't know the hunting grounds. So to get to know where you are, what the terrain looks like, what to expect. Is it deer? Is it hare? Is it what is it? Is it even boar? So this then helps you to choose your right tools and to create the right teams, because some of the teams are drivers driving the animals towards the hunters in a specific hunting ground, and the other ones are the hunting teams. But as Nico said, it's very disciplined and organized, because if everyone shoots around like crazy, there will be casualties, I can guarantee, right? So in the end, for me, what really struck me is these guys are well organized, very disciplined. They work together to track, to target, and to capture. And that sparked some images in my head when it came to what is a VSAI as a hunting club when it came to these jiggles. So thank you, gents. Back
Mark,
to
was really great story. So as much as you hate the jiggle, as great was the answer. So thank you for that.
So let's assume. Oh, Mark,
I love.
go.
By the way,
Go
I
for
was
it.
just going to say, Stephan, I love the research you did. Go and find somebody you know who's a hunter. I don't actually think I know anybody who's a hunter. This proves that this is not an American live stream, right? But
Quite
Yeah.
some dedication went into that, definitely. Yeah.
Guess what? There's also a hunting association in my town, and they provide the best sausages made out of boar. So every year I buy a huge amount of sausages for barbecue season. And by the way, Ali, next time you drive by, sausages. There we go.
Have
So
that planted in my mind.
do so. So let's assume we prepared the workshop. We got reasonable alignment on what leadership wants to achieve, painting the future of the company. Now, it's not only senior management, it's many more people that will join. How do you find the right participants and stakeholders? What is your experience? Mark.
so I'm going to jump in first. I'll say, look, and in line with that thinking that you've got a potential version sketched. And even if you're like Nico, right, and you've done a leading safe and then you're going straight into a VSAI, as often as not, if you've got that type of group in a leading safe, you'll at some point draw some value streams because you'll ask them some questions so they can relate to the material while you're teaching it. Right. I've usually, in those executive leading safes, I've usually got a kind of sketch of their portfolio sitting in my brain by that point. But assuming you've got some kind of sketch, you go, well, what do I know? I need asset owners, I need people leaders, and I need technical leaders, and I need profit and loss leaders. And I need a mix of people in terms of seniority. I need senior enough people in the room to make calls that can stick, and junior enough people in the room to actually have a clue what's happening on the ground. So find the splash zone and make sure you think in terms of diverse representation so you get multiple perspectives on things. But whatever you do, you're probably going to come up with more technical people than business people. But if you want a good result, actually shift that and make sure that business people are very, very well represented in the mix.
And very often, the people that you talk with or talk to, they typically know who to invite for these kind of things.
Yeah.
They typically, even though they cannot voice it out loud into a large audience, they typically know that, for this kind of thing, you need to have that architect you need to have that person from finance and this person from operations, because they understand the total product portfolio the best, or they've been working with it for the longest, or whatever. Most of the time, the knowledge is there, but political games might yeah, how do you call it, block people to invite the right ones. And hence, as a neutral middle ground SPCT or fellow, who's at least, or SPC, who is hosting these kind of workshops, you'd be able to be the spokesperson and invite these people.
Yeah, and in my case, I do a lot of classical stakeholder management, finding out who are the people who can decide, who are the people who are willing to decide, who are the people who are willing to decide in the wrong direction, and do really a classical stakeholder management or stakeholder analysis. And then in the interviews, in the empathy interviews, asking who do you think should be asked to, who should be the next one. And then sometimes we are surprised because we didn't see this coming. Because if you do the stakeholder management, you always ask only a small portion of the enterprise, and they have their own version of reality. Then it's good to have more versions of reality, and that's the way how I find the people. The one Mark said, what Ali said exactly, plus asking and stakeholder management.
So I think the one thing I'd also jump back in on there is, if you follow these threads, you're potentially going to have an awful lot of people in your workshop. And, I just had flashbacks to, it wasn't even a VSAI, right? It was, when I'm launching an art, I'll usually start with an art visioning workshop, where we go through and we pull the business owners and the like together, and we go, what's the vision statement for this art? What are the key success measures, and so on and so forth. And I normally look for maybe 10 to 12 people in one of those. And I had one a few years ago. It was a very visible art with a lot of people with an opinion. And I walked into the vision workshop for it, and there were 45 executives and senior leaders in that workshop. And I died 1,000 deaths. I went, there's no way we're ever going to land on a decision with this many opinionated senior people in the room. And, true to form, we didn't. So there's a balance to find between, inviting everybody who might contribute and actually finding your way to a decision. And sometimes what you find yourself doing is, and this is where you might play with the agenda a little bit, to go, there are different times of the agenda where I've got different groups of people in the room. And, maybe there are stages where, it's the more junior people doing a lot of work and making recommendations, but recognizing there might be a moment where you need to shrink the group to the decision makers to go, okay, we're not facilitating a conversation between 45 people to make a call here, right? And to have some potentially very awkward discussions. We've got 10 people. So recognize you might need to, as part of your agenda design, flex up who's in the room for different stages of the discussion.
And maybe one tip for you as an SPC moderating this, if you are on site, what happens is the one who has the pen in the hand is the one who steers the conversation. So if you have too many people, you can steer who is the next who's talking. So if you have too many people in the room, you can choose who is next to talk, because the one with the pen near the flip chart is the one who is guiding the things. So remember, don't give the pen away, because then you gave away the moderation.
And you should go and watch all our episodes on facilitation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or with the idea of painting the future, how about a paintbrush?
Even better. And
distribute paintbrushes to the audience.
Yeah, perfect. So let's not forget, it might be large groups in such a workshop. You will have breakout sessions. If you mix senior management with even juniors and technical people, what I experience over and over again, if you only have senior management in a room, they behave like tigers and lions. They don't behave. As soon as they are in a different group, with their subordinates or their people, they start behaving and they start talking to the people and explaining what it is all about. So let's assume we had a successful workshop. We painted the future, but now comes execution time. And I would like to merge two questions kind of into one. How do you mitigate and avoid hindrance of an effective execution of what you found out? Because boring stuff, you have some results, but nothing happens in your organization. And still different opinions in the room, although you would have probably a clear result and a clear guidance how to then execute, how to implement those different value streams, arts, and even agile teams.
So, Stefan,
Who
I
would like
reckon
to start?
you should take the first one on this one because, you've gone last on every other question and we've stolen half the good stories. So, why don't you open up for us?
Thank you for the facilitation. So, what I would say is let's have a confidence vote at the end of such a workshop. I use confidence votes quite often. Are we sure that this is the way? And if senior managers, tech people, business people in the room agree on that, you create the momentum that is already the first step of mitigating and avoiding a hindrance, right? Because if I would see that Nico is doing it and I'm still there with a different opinion, as soon as we go into execution mode, Nico might show up and say, hey, Stefan, you showed us a 3. Why do you behave like showing a 2? What's missing? What should we change, right? And I try to do it this way as soon as we go into execution mode.
It's a long silence.
Who's next?
Who's taking the ball next?
Yeah. Okay. Let me just. I'll just come clear. For this topic, I'm still struggling. Because I tend to like, everybody to voice their opinions, and if you've created an environment in which constructive opinions can be shared, but you have a lot of people in the room, then that's a lot of opinions. So how do you blend that together? And I wish I had a good approach for that, but I haven't found it yet. So, this is one of those questions where I just do not have a satisfying answer for.
For me, it's divide and conquer. So make a lot of breakout groups doing the same exercise. Then people can just fight there, and then they have an opinion as a group, and then let the groups fight again in public. And that's the way I'm doing, and the way how I assure that we started right, or we have cut everything in the right pieces. Is as I think in the last episode, like the weather forecast, the weather of today is similar like the weather of tomorrow. I just use the last year's projects, whatever you had, initiatives, epics, and see how would it be now with this kind of results. And usually people realize, okay, this variation is the better one, because for the last year it would have been less less dependencies and so on and so on, and so that they are easier to choose then. And usually, the next year is similar. They know the initiatives, but it's easier to cheat on the future than to cheat on the past, because in the past you know what happened and you can arguing, and for the future you just make everything fit in the idea you have.
Yet another fantastic one-liner. Beautiful.
What else would you add, Nico?
That's it.
So, I think as an agile person, you look at these things and you go, there are good answers and bad answers. Because I know, for example, personally, I have a big preference for stream-aligned arts that are standalone in terms of end-to-end value, right? And so the more stream-aligned an answer looks like, the happier I am. And I grudgingly acknowledge sometimes you need complicated subsystem arts and sometimes you need platform arts, but I'm a streamline guy. And in my younger years, I used to push really hard to manipulate and, set the scene for us to get to an answer that felt good to me as an agilist. But the thing that I've learned the hard way is that a bad answer that sticks is way better than a good answer that doesn't stick. And if you land at the end of this value stream and art identification workshop and you land at something and every agile bone in your body hates it, but every leader in that room agrees that it's a positive change, then, maybe it's a baby step, but at least it's something that's likely to stick. So that's probably the first piece of advice for me, is be prepared to support the group landing on an answer you don't like. Second trick I'd say is stagger the workshop, right? If it's a 2-day workshop, don't do 2 back-to-back days. And don't do an agenda that says we're doing, half and half. I actually like to stagger it. Generally, the period I like is over 2 weeks. Maybe over 1 week. I don't want it to be longer than over 2 weeks, because I don't want to lose momentum. But I like a workshop that generates options, a gap where we can go and do some testing of those options and the underlying assumptions about them, and then a workshop where we can come back and go, now let's process the data that we've built while we test our assumptions and our hypotheses before we land on a decision point, right? Because an awful lot of what's going to happen when you're going through the wrangling, or as Nico would say, as the people are fighting, is they're fighting about opinions and assumptions. And if you can get a possibility to go, okay, we've generated some options, and I noticed the toolkit now has a little table that you can use to go, this is how we pick an option. Well, I like to go, well, there's options. There's always multiple options. Generate options and they go, what would have to be true, right? Any option will optimize for something and sub-optimize for something else. And, make that clear, make clear the assumptions people have about that, and then use that gap time to test it. And then on the back of it, when you're actually in the making the call at the end of the workshop mode, borrow a tool from Chip and Dan Heath in their book Decisive, which I think we've mentioned in other episodes. It's a great book about making better decisions. And they talk about this idea of setting tripwires. When I make a decision, also publish conditions to say, if in this situation, it will be clear it's time to revisit this decision. So that what you're doing is you're saying, okay, as we make this choice, we're also setting up explicitly, as part of that choice, the reasons that would cause us to reevaluate it. And maybe it's, here's the easy one. I have some platform. I'd love to embed it in a whole bunch of stream-aligned arts, but it's too fragile technically for me at the moment. There's no way you could split it up. All right, fantastic. Then we'll have effectively usually a complicated subsystem art for that platform. But then we go, okay, what are we going to do to make it less fragile to enable us to make a better choice in terms of value stream alignment and flow? And then what's the tripwire we can set to be able to recognize that moment? So you're really baking in the revisiting in the future of the choices that you make in the present.
And it's while listening to you, Mark, and sorry for blowing time box, Stephan, I just remembered my best advice I've given to somebody, and I just forgot it during the episode. It was the first thing I'm doing before I start the workshop is creating a criteria catalog for deciding. So how do we decide at the end which one to pick? And I start with this catalog, because it's also easier to cheat when you think it's that decision, and now we have to decide. Then you find ideas why yours is the best. So I want to have this catalog in the beginning before we start the process. Which are the criteria to decide which one is the best, and then at the end I show the criteria again, which we aligned.
Perfect, gents. We are almost at the end of this episode. And Mark already opened the door to just one key takeaway. Could you please repeat your takeaway, Mark?
A bad decision that sticks is better than a good decision that doesn't.
Perfect.
Mine is alignment needs friction first.
I have as the one key takeaway that the right involved collaborative stakeholders can make or break this session.
And to conclude, it's design time, and design means you have a series of deliberate and intentional decisions. Even a bad answer could be much more valuable than a good answer that is too late. And with that, talking stick back to Mark.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of, and somehow or other, I think we all cut our stories short. We almost made it into the time box for this one. We are now on a bit of a break, and multiple reasons for that break. One of those, of course, is the Safe Summit in Sorrento is coming up very soon, and some of us are traveling for that, although sadly I miss out on the Amalfi Coast experience. There's also then holidays and Easter, so we are on a bit of a break, and we'll be returning the other side of Easter. Sometime between now and then, we'll do some backlog refinement to figure out what we'll talk about in our first episode back. But we'd love people saying, hey, can you explore this? So if you've got something you'd like us to explore, drop us a note, and we'll add it to the backlog, and we'll probably be so excited that somebody asked for it that it'll go straight to the top of the backlog. So in the meantime, have a wonderful few weeks, and we'll see you soon.
Goodbye.